Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we are going to cover, first of all, the visit of Prime Minister Modi to the state of Manipur. Now, why is this significant? First of all, you have to understand Manipur has been under extreme violence for the more than 2 years now because it started in May 2023. And even today, although the violence has somewhat reduced, there are still issues that are persisting in the society of Manipur, and unless you don't solve that issue, the Manipur situation won't go good. So in our today's video, we'll understand what are the key issues that are still plaguing the society of Manipur. And the notes which I will be utilizing in this session, if you want to download them, they will be made available on this particular Telegram channel known as ATS Live. So go to this channel, download the notes, and while you're at it, please subscribe the channel also. Okay. Let us start today's discussion by understanding the context. Now, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is on his official visit to Manipur today to interact with what is known as internally displaced people in two districts, in Churachandpur as well as Imphal. Imphal is the capital of Manipur. Now, this will be the Prime Minister's first official visit to the Manipur state after the violence broke in the state in the month of May 2023. So, there has been now almost 27 months since the violence have erupted, and this marks the first visit of Prime Minister of the country. Now, you need to understand, whenever the topmost executive of India visits a particular state, you can expect the situation to go better, right? But we still don't know because there are certain issues that are still there in the society of Manipur. So what are these issues? Let us cover them one by one, okay? Now, first of all, to start the discussion, we'll have to know where is Manipur located after all. Manipur is an integral part of India located in the northeastern part of the country. And along with Arunachal, Nagaland and Mizoram, Manipur shares its border with the country of Myanmar. Right now, all the countries who are bordering Myanmar, there is an arrangement alongside the borders of these states called as free movement regime. Free movement regime means the people living on both sides of the border up till 16 kilometers, they can freely move to other parts of the other side of the border without having the need of passports and visas. But this free movement regime is also creating problems in Manipur. What are the problems? We'll discuss it. No need to worry. Now, the background of this issue: from the last 27 months since the violence broke in Manipur, Manipur has witnessed many significant events. These events started with prolonged periods of violence and displacement which happened between two different sections of communities, that is Meiteis who are living in valley regions of in and around Imphal, and Kuki-Zo communities who are living in the hill tracts or the hilly areas of Manipur, right? Now, because this violence erupted between the two dominating communities of Manipur, it led to collapse of law and order. Now, the first aspect of state that you have to take care of is that the state should be responsible for implementing law and order. But if violence breaks out, if state is not able to control this violence, can't you say that the rule of law is not being followed in the state? This is exactly the case. Similarly, it has also led to strengthening of armed groups. Both of these communities, the sections of these communities have supplies of arms and ammunition, and these arms and ammunition have been used extensively to conduct violence against the other groups. And this has led to very fluid situation in the state of Manipur. But even with this fluid situation, elections happened in the summer of 2024 in Manipur due to Lok Sabha. Similarly, in February 2025, after the then CM of Manipur, Mr. Biren Singh, resigned from office, and no other party came or wanted to form a government. So from 2025 February, the central government has imposed precedence rule in the state of Manipur under Article 356 of the Constitution. And recently there has been somewhat positive developments, and this positive development means that there has been gradual reduction or gradual ebb in the violence that is happening in Manipur. So these are the sum total of events that have transpired in the last 27 months. But you must be asking a question. If the violence have reduced, why haven't they been made zero, or why haven't they been eliminated? The answer is that there are some situation or some issues that are still wanting to be addressed. What are these issues? Let us cover them one by one. Now, the first issue is the rehabilitation of the displaced population. Now, because of the violence that happened in Manipur, it led to displacement of as much as 57,000 people who are being called as internally displaced persons or IDP. And they have been living in more than 280 relief camps which has been set up by the state's administration. Now, these displaced people are from two different categories of people. First, they belong to an area or they live in an area where members of other communities dominate. For example, a Kuki-Zo member who actually hails from hill areas of the state, if they are living in the regions of valleys, that is in Imphal Valley, which is a Methi dominated area, they might face violence. Similarly, Methi people, if they are living in hill tracts, they may face violence from Kuki-Zo community members. So this is an example of where members of another community living in a majority of other people's community areas, they are facing violence. Second are the people who are living in the peripheral areas, also called as fringe areas. So suppose if a Methi person is living very close to the hill tracts, they might face violence or retribution of violence. Similarly, Kuki-Zo people living very close to the fringe areas of Imphal Valley, they might face violence, and this is the second category of people who have faced violence. So in total, these are the two kinds of people who have faced violence. And how many people are displaced? More than 57,000 people. Now, to deal with the resettlement of these internally displaced persons, the government came up with a resettlement plan which was to be implemented in 3 ways. And after the implementation of this plan, the government expected to wind down the relief camps that it has set up, as much as 280 camps. Now, the priority of the government at that time was to allow resettlement of displaced people who have displaced from fringe area first, because this is somewhat of a low-hanging fruit. And after this has been successfully implemented, the government wanted to resettle those people who have been living or who have been residing in the hostile majority areas. And since their houses have been burned in many cases, the government was also willing to settle them back in the prefabricated houses. But in reality, what happened? I told you how many are people who have been displaced? 57,000 people. But in reality, only 5,000 people has been able to return voluntarily just because of fear of violence. And how many people are still remaining? Close to 52,000. So this progress has happened, but this progress has somewhat been slow in recent times. Okay. Now, what you need to understand is the second problem. This second problem is called as free movement of people within the state and establishment of buffer zone. Now, what happens is that the population of Manipur is divided between hill areas and the valley region. I told you, hill regions is dominated by tribes, mostly of Kuki-Zo communities, whereas valley region is dominated by tribes of people belonging to Methi community. Now, what happened? Since the eruption of violence, the movement of people belonging to one community has not happened in the areas which is dominated by other sections of the community, right? And because of this, the valley and hill boundaries, they have hardened. And to prevent violence happening within these two communities, the government has set up what are known as buffer zones, and these buffer zones are manned by security personnel. So that these are the buffer zones, and this segregates Kuki and Zo communities from that of Methi communities. Now, the consequence of this violence and establishment of buffer zone and prevention of free movement of people have been faced by both Kuki communities and Zo communities as well as the Methi communities. For example, Methi people are living in valleys, so they can't access highways that are located towards the hillsides, which is dominated by Kuki-Zo community, right? So this is the first problem. Second problem is that Kuki people, they need access of very important resources that might be available in the valley region of Imphal. For example, airports, hospitals, markets. So they can't access these kind of infrastructure just because these infrastructure are available in the Methi majority areas, right? So this is the consequence, that the free movement of people, which is essentially a part of fundamental right under Article 19, is not being able to exercise by both of these communities just because of the violence and establishment of buffer zones. And this is one biggest problem that the people of Manipur is facing. Now, Center has trying to assuage this situation. Center is trying to minimize the impact on free movement. So Center tried to attempt a setting up of free movement zones just 1 month after the implementation of President's rule. But the consequence of this measure was that it led to violent clashes in this Kangpokpi district and also led to death of one person and injuries to many. So what the government has done, it is trying to make compromises with these two communities. Now, some compromises have happened. Actually, what happened was that Kuki-Zo, they allowed essential goods to travel through valley, but they did not allow movement of Methi people in the hill tracts, right? So this is one another problem, that some compromises have happened, but that does not have restored the complete free movement. Similarly, no reciprocity has been shown from Methi groups for allowing of Kuki-Zo movement inside their valley territories, right? So this is a limited compromise that has been achieved by the government, and this was the second problem. Now let us come back to the third problem. This is the need for dialogue. Now, whenever violence happens between two sides, you need to reduce this violence, and the only way possible is that the two countries, the two communities can talk to each other and come to a resettlement or conclusion. But the dialogue between the communities have been absent, and the violence that has been created because of this absence of dialogue has led to death of more than 250 people, which has somewhat reduced since November 2024. But this situation is very volatile. Why? I told you initially, both of these communities are heavily armed. So there is a situation, if you allow talking or if you allow communication to happen from these communities, and if they don't go as per expectation, it might lead to further emergence of violence. Also, center is trying to assuage these conditions. What center government is trying to do, it is trying to talk to these communities individually, not in togetherness, so that the situation does not worsen if it can't improve, right? Now, the problem with this dialogue was that the government of India and Manipur signed suspension of operations with the Kuki-Zo community organizations known as Kuki National Organization and United People's Front. Now, this pact, when it was signed, it included a clause which was very important. It stated that the communities of Kuki-Zo would honor the territorial integrity of Manipur. Why is this significant? One of the key demands of Kuki-Zo community from the government was that government should carve out a separate union territory out of the state of Manipur. Just because Kuki-Zo community members, they were not comfortable to live in a state where Metis also reside. Okay, but once this suspension of operation pact was signed, it stated a clause that they would honor territorial integrity of Manipur, that they would want the state of Manipur to remain as it is geographically, right? So this was one aspect. Another aspect was the reaction that have came from different communities, right? First of all, Metis, they've objected the suspension of operations pact that was signed between government and Kuki-Zo communities. They are saying that this pact actually legitimizes the insurgent groups that are present in Kuki-Zo community. So this was the Metis argument. Now, Kuki-Zo community members, they are highlighting that our demand of wanting a separate union territory with legislature still remains. We have signed a suspension of operation, but this demand still remains. So it remains to be seen whether central government would agree to this demand. I don't think so. Central government would agree to this demand. The fourth problem is the political situation of the state. Now we have to realize India is a democratic country, and the only way to govern India successfully is through a democratic form of government. Now, earlier there was this democratic form of government, but because Biren Singh came from Methi community and Kuki-Zo community members were not confident of his governance, he resigned from office because he was unable to control the violence. The problem with this resignation was that no other person or no other party was able to form the government, and as a result, presidential rule was implemented in the state of Manipur, which was initially welcomed by most of the communities in Manipur. But since then, many months have passed. This was imposed in February 2025. Now, there is a section of people, including the members of ruling party, that is ruling NDA, coming from Naga communities, coming from valley-based communities. They are demanding restoration of an elected government. But you know, although this is desirable, but this might not be very practical for as far as Manipur's current situation is concerned, because whenever you have to set up a new government, you needed to conduct an election. But one of the negative consequences of election is that it might lead to frequent or further polarization, which is a very big problem in Manipur. So therefore, central government is reluctant because it feels if we allow for elections to happen, it might fear or it might increase the instability that is already there in the state of Manipur. So this was the fourth problem. Now let us understand the biggest problem, which according to many has been the reason of violence in Manipur, is the border situation of Manipur. Now, while we were discussing the map, I told you, right, Manipur is bordering with Myanmar, and in the borders of India and Myanmar, there was an arrangement called as free movement regime, where people hailing from 16 kilometers of side from each borders, they were able to move to other side of the border without the need of visas and a passport. And this was because many people living in Northeast, they have close familial and societal ties from people living across the border in Myanmar. And this is an arrangement which essentially favors tribes like Naga, Kuki and Zos. Now, the consequence of this free movement regime is that there is also a possibility that supply of arms and ammunition, logistical support for insurgency might happen from across the border from those separatist communities who are living in Myanmar. And this is actually true. How do you think both of these communities have been able to secure weapons and arms and ammunition? No other option but through Myanmar, right? So as a result of this, the government of India decided to close this porous border of Indo-Myanmar by scrapping the free movement regime and announcing fencing of the border, which is something unheard of in the region of Northeast and borders of Myanmar. Now, Metis, they've alleged that the Kukizo community members are using this opportunity of free movement regime, or they were using this opportunity because they share a close tie with Chin people who live across the border in Myanmar, and these people were supplying arms and ammunition to Kukis, and using which the Kukis were conducting violence of Metis, right? So this was the allegations imposed by Meti community. Now, since the government has scrapped the free movement of regime and has decided to implement fencing of the border, it has met with opposition mainly from the tribes which inhabit the hill regions. That is the Kukizo. As Nagas, they have opposed the fencing. They are of the opinion that we share close ethnic, social and trade ties across the border, and if you close the borders, it will affect our ability to keep close contact with our relatives. It will affect their ability to do businesses on the other side of the borders, move across and take goods and services across the border. And to protest against this movement, a group of Nagas, United Naga Council, decided to impose trade embargo before the Prime Minister's official visit. So these are the sum total of 5 issues that are still plaguing the state of Manipur. And before the resolution of this issue, addressing of these 5 issues remain very important, right? And this is why we discuss this in our today's class. Now, what do you feel about this issue? Please let me know in the comment section. I know this is a very sensitive topic, but we as an educational channel, everybody in India, I hope, wants best for Manipur, that is elimination of the violence and establishment of peace and tranquility. If you belong to Manipur, if you belong to one of these two communities who are at odds with each other, please do let me know in the comments, but please try to be very civil. Please try to raise your concern, but in a language that is acceptable by all. We are not looking to increase the problems that you're facing. We know you are facing a lot of problems. Each and every Indian wants this situation to get resolved and establishment of normalcy back in Manipur, don't you? So please let me know in the comments what you feel. And before moving to the question, I also wanted to let you know something. If you want to take admissions to our batches, we are starting a new batch from 20th of September, and this is for 2026 exams. Similarly, we have also batches for 2027 and 28 and also for optional. You can take admissions at a discounted rate, but you will get this discounted rate only when you use the code ATS Live, okay? So please remember that. Now, there is a practice question. Which of the following Indian states share a border with Myanmar? The answer to this question is Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. Tripura does not share borders with Myanmar. Actually, it shares borders with another country known as Bangladesh, right? So the correct answer to this question is 1, 2, 3 and 4, and option A is your right answer, okay? Now, I was telling you about the comments. Please be very civil in your comments, and if you want to download the notes, you can go to this channel, ATS Live, and download the notes, okay? And what do you feel about Prime Minister's visit? Are you hopeful that this situation will subside? I am actually hopeful, okay? Please let me know what you feel in the comments, and you can download the notes from this channel, okay? Please have a very good night.